You are just simply recalcitrant. Okay? You're indefatigable in your stubbornness. What a moron.
I wasn't here. What was his argument?
Well, he was saying that the Christian God is not exclusively the necessary precondition of all things, that there could be another God world out there. Okay? But where we left off was that saying that um, everybody, if I have a worldview as a Bible believing Christian, and I have my neighbor who's a Bible believing Christian, if we simply disagree, and this is what I interjected, this is what he believes, that if there's even one belief within each respective worldview that conflicts with each other, then we have completely contradictory worldviews, and this is false. Okay. What matters is that the fundamental parameters of the worldview will be at odds with the fundamental parameters of the other worldview. Not just there's a differing of beliefs. So, for example, if I hold to the Christian worldview and I say it's 3 o'clock, and my buddy who holds to the same theology and worldview as I do and says no, it's 3:10, do we have completely mutually contradictory worldviews? Right? I mean, total moronic. Right? So, if what he is saying is true, that if you merely disagree on one insignificant belief in a worldview, and therefore the other person has a completely different worldview, then everything anyone else ever says to him about anything is false, because that those propositions are going to derive and depend upon a composite worldview, which
Darth
that
cannot
worldview is
prove
false.
Trinity in the Bible. Darth cannot prove Trinity in the Bible because
Here we go. Here. Wrong check. Oh, he immediately left the server. How about that?
Did I hear somebody evading?
Yeah, people evade all the time when I talk with them.
Ooh, by all means, if they're evading for purposes of shirking off their banished role, please do report them, and we'll get them in a lot of trouble. That's very naughty.
Jesus.
Naughty.
Naughty.
See, a proposition is only true and real from the worldview that it derives from. So if all other worldviews other than his own is false, then he's going to have to rationally conclude that everything anyone thinks or says to him is false. I feel sorry for him. He sounded like Harvey Firestein, and he has the mind of a 50-year-old, and he says he's a 30-year-old young man. Pretty sad.
Sounds like who?
Harvey Firestein.
Yeah, that's who I was thinking of, because I was thinking of the Mrs. Doubtfire movie.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Here you go. Here's Harvey's Firestein.
Of shaving my arms, my legs, my eyebrows, my chest.
Harvey Firestein is a homosexual who is a playwright, an actor and a playwright, and he talks like this. I really wish we had people that had more intelligence and basic, human education than these numbnuts who pop up all the time. Okay, the floor is open. If anybody wants to defend atheism, agnosticism, or evolution, you're free to step forward. I don't suppose we're going to have too many people with intestinal fortitude.
I got a question for you. What are there any particular biblical passages that you contemplate often, or that like you personally have the most trouble reconciling, or you think about the most?
I don't find any particular passage largely problematic. There's a couple of passages when I've looked up Bible contradictions where, out of the hundreds that I've perused through, maybe one I'll just scratch my head that I haven't resolved yet. But it doesn't. It's not a defeater.
Right. Any come to mind? Just curious.
Oh well, sometimes there are there may be some typographical errors in the copying. For example, we might have a difference between one number in the Masoretic text versus the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then something different in the Septuagint. So what we have here are textual variants, but not really an actual error.
Gotcha.
Every alleged Bible contradiction, for the most part, that I've actually investigated, that I've ever heard of, when I look at it and I just go into Google, type in the verse, type in Bible contradiction, and I examine the text, and then I look at what various commentators say, I look what lay researchers have written about it, they evaporate. They're just not there. These are just superficial pot shots by people who are too lazy to actually seriously investigate it. It's about as substantive as saying that we had contradictory eyewitness accounts about the Titanic splitting in half. Yeah, they reported what they saw. And what they saw was not a contradiction. Now, if they stated, no, the Titanic did not, in fact, split in half, and somebody said, no, it did split in half, then that would be a contradiction. But when they gave a testimony as to what they observed, say, we did not see it split in half. There's lots of these silly little childish little attacks. And you know why? It's because they take the Bible very seriously. They recognize that the Christian God is the best contender for the one true God, and if they really believe that the God of Christianity was God of mythology, they would just basically ignore it. They wouldn't take it seriously. So do we have any atheists who would like to explain why your atheism is coherent? Magnum, what are you doing back in here? You're a troll. All right, we'll get rid of it. It never ceases to amaze me that these hemorrhoidal troglodytes who heckle and troll me on other channels, and then they want to come in here and think they're going to get the pleasure of listening to yours truly. Well, it's not going to happen.
There's a fella in the chat named Mulder says he wants to discuss. I don't know if you've got him muted or what.
He's probably new to the server. That's why he's muted. Go ahead, Mulder.
Hey, Darth. How's it going?
Let me check. Seems to be okay.
Hello, hello.
Yes. Go ahead, Scully.
Hey, Darth. How's it going? Hello?
I'm listening.
Good.
Okay. So the conversation you had...
You're screaming into your mic.
Oh, sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah.
So the conversation you had several minutes ago about worldviews. I don't think your worldview is different than mine. I'm an atheist, and I think we share the same worldview. We share the same objective worldview. You're just adding your own personal subjective portion on top of that.
Is this your version of humor?
Do you agree that we share an objective reality?
Sir,
please answer the question, Darth.
That's the answer is we both share the same objective reality, which is of God's creation, but we do not have a shared worldview. You have a different property set for what you consider to be objective reality than I do. Now,
okay, how do we define objective reality, Darth?
Do you know what a worldview is?
Yes, I'm aware of what a worldview is.
What is it?
It's basically your mental map of how you think everything works, depending on how much thought you put into it. That could include the entire universe. That could just include humanity. That just could include planet Earth.
No.
However you want to.
No, that's a misrepresentation. You started off good, but then you went off into the ditch. A worldview, and I'll even give you a secular definition from university textbooks on worldview. A worldview is your the set of interconnected and interrelated beliefs that are unified, either concretely or abstractly. Okay, let me repeat again. A worldview is your entire set of interconnected and interrelated beliefs. And some of those beliefs are more foundational than others. That, in other words, certain beliefs depend upon lower beliefs. And those set of beliefs are unified either by something fundamental concrete or it's an abstract unification. So that's what a worldview is. Okay? So my worldview is unified by what we call God. Okay, God is the concrete universal. He's the concrete unifier, as opposed to an abstraction where the mind unifies the particulars. So in my worldview, God is real. He's concrete. He institutes and secures everything. And so he's the concrete unifier. Now, in your worldview, there's a set of particulars that is unified, but it's not unified concretely by God. So we have different worldviews, sir, that each of the particulars in our respective worldviews exist from completely, the particulars exist with completely different origins or reasons for existing.
Right, but can you recognize that is a subjective portion of your worldview and not an objective portion of your worldview?
No, sir. Our worldview will contain certain objective notions and subjective notions. It's not really important. What is important is this. Every belief that I have in my worldview exists only in virtue of what concretely unifies it. Your worldview has a set of beliefs, and every belief that you invoke as true and valid exists without necessarily deriving from my concrete universal. So if you say the sky is blue and I say the sky is blue, these are seemingly the same proposition, but they are not, because there's an unstated premise in both of our statements. So I say the sky is blue in virtue of God. You say the sky is blue in virtue of not God. So in actuality, we have two contradictory propositions. So we do not have the same worldview, sir.
But the worldview, with respect to us objectively agreeing that the sky is blue, is identical. But we have subjective beliefs on the reasoning why.
You're not getting this, okay? Every proposition will be what it is in terms of what it ultimately derives as to why it exists, right? So if I say there's a rock on the side of the road and you say there's a rock on the side of the road, it doesn't matter what the proposition is. All we need to realize is that they have a superficial resemblance, okay? I say rock on the side of the road, you say rock on the side of the road. But you see, the rock is only what it is in virtue of its ultimate grounding, okay? You cannot remove a proposition from its metaphysical derivation and its metaphysical context. Because if you do, then it will be a different proposition. Okay? So
Okay.
every belief that you have, you believe that it ultimately derives and depends upon not God. Every belief that I have only exists putatively by virtue of God. So we do not have a shared worldview.
We have a shared worldview with regards to objectivity.
I'm going to end
Hold
this.
on,
You are a broken
hold on.
Reddit. You are repeating the same thing before. I've explained something to you that is not controversial. So I can only conclude at this point in time that you're simply being a contrarian, which is a form of trolling. We do not have the same worldview. Okay? A
With
worldview,
regards to your example about the rock,
if we have a shared worldview, okay, every worldview is instantiated by virtue of what its ultimacy is. Okay? And if you have an ultimacy in a set of fundamental parameters that are at odds with each other, then we don't have the same worldview. Okay? Now,
okay, so then
listen?
where's
Do you agree that every proposition or statement of fact can only be invoked as actual and intelligible, not only in virtue of the worldview, but what is ultimate in that worldview, which instantiates every ontological state? Do you agree with that?
if we assume that we can actually know actual facts, then yes, I'd agree with that.
Sir. I have a worldview, and within that worldview, I have an ontological ultimacy from which all beliefs derive and depend. Okay? Now, do you have an ultimacy from which all of your propositions derive and depend?
You made a little switch there. You changed from belief to propositions.
I'm using them interchangeably, sir. It doesn't matter. You're nitpicking. Do you have an ultimacy of reality that unifies all the particulars?
An ultimacy of reality. Can you
Hold on. I have to take
thought?
an important phone call. I'll be right back. Okay. Give me 3 minutes.
Yeah, dude, just give up.
Give up what?
Atheism.
How is that even possible to give up?
Because you don't come to an atheist position initially. You come to a God claim initially.
Right, but how do you give up atheism? It's a lack of something. You'd have to add on to it. You don't give it up.
You accept the God claim.
Okay, but I'm not going to accept the God claim without evidence for God.
Well, you
Just
wouldn't
choose
be
your beliefs, mate. Just choose your beliefs like us. Just choose what to
wouldn't be an
believe.
atheist if God wasn't real.
That's unintelligible.
What do you mean? How's it unintelligible? You can't be an atheist if there was no God claim. You do realize that your worldview consists of denying
I agree.
the God claim.
I agree. Atheist is a label.
I get that's a position. I get that's a choice that you made in your life, right?
No, it was not a choice. I was born this way.
Okay.
I was born an atheist, and I was never indoctrinated by my parents to hold faith-based beliefs.
Voluntary, right?
This is the default state.
Your parents are lead parents. They're amazing parents. They did a great job. But what I'm trying to explain to you is your worldview can't just be God denialism.
It's not God denialism. This is the default worldview. You're adding something subjective and additional to it.
All you're doing is denying the existence of God. You're not proving your worldview at all. You're just going to go to the claim of something that you're against. You're not proving anything.
Does that suggest that you've proven your worldview?
Well, I have a worldview. You don't.
Have you proven that worldview?
It's just to refute mine.
Do you have evidence for your worldview?
Okay.
Listen
All right,
to me.
I'm back, Mulder.
You refute the Christian worldview. That doesn't give you a worldview. You're just denying the existence of God. That's not a worldview.
No.
No. The denial of God is a worldview. Bart.
Well, according to me, it's not. I don't think it is. Because you can't just sit there and go, no, and then that be your explanation of why everything is, or what your morality stems from, just by you just saying no.
Okay. So Mulder,
Yeah.
either your set of all beliefs will how shall I put this so you can understand it? In your world beliefs, all of your beliefs, because it's a worldview, will have to be unified. They're either going to be unified by a concrete universal, or the universal will be an abstraction which takes place in your mind. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
what about metaphysical universal?
Yeah, everybody has some kind of a metaphysical universal, whether they realize it or not. Even if they attempt to deny it, then they're in deep trouble. Okay, philosophically. So every worldview, except for those people who want to dispute this, which would be foolish to, every worldview is going to be unified. Okay, so whatever we hold to be the universal that unifies all the particulars, if we have a different universal, okay, or in this case a concrete universal, what differentiates one worldview from another, first and foremost, is the concrete universal. So worldview A will have as its concrete universal as A. All of the particulars within worldview A are unified because they derive and depend upon A. Okay? So in worldview B, all of the particulars are unified by the concrete universal B. So worldview B and A are mutually contradictory and mutually exclusive. It doesn't matter that they contain propositions which have a superficial resemblance within each of the respective worldviews, such as the sky is blue, because the actuality, interpretability, and the intelligibility of any given belief or proposition will only be in virtue of its concrete universal, from what it derives from, the reason why it exists.
Right.
So you and I have a different concrete universal, and all of our sub-beliefs derive from a concrete universal that is mutually exclusive to each other. So under that conceptual scheme, we don't have the same worldview. We might have shared propositional beliefs that superficially seem to agree, but if we start to examine what is the ultimate metaphysical grounding for it, we're going to see that they're completely contradictory to each other. So you and I am a Christian theist. You are an atheist. So we have a completely opposite, we have antithetical worldviews.
I don't think they're antithetical. I think what you...
what's your concrete universal?
This is what I'm getting to.
What is your concrete universal, sir?
I don't think there's a single. I don't think there's a single.
Is the Christian God? Oh, okay. So do you want to go there?
Yours is.
Because I rub my hands like a little giddy little schoolboy getting free chocolate chip cookies. Goody, 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 goody. You want to go there?
Go where? Where are we going?
Yeah, where you're going right now. Do you want to deny? Yeah. You want to deny that you have a concrete universal?
No, I do have concrete universal. I'm just saying.
Okay,
I don't.
What is it? What is it?
Okay, there isn't a single universal.
Okay, so you just said you just said you have a concrete universal. Now you're saying you don't. Which is it?
There are universal metaphysical axioms that underpin my worldview.
Well, okay, listen. I lose my patience when somebody is simply ignoring what I'm saying to you. Does your worldview, your entire interconnected, interrelated beliefs, does that worldview possess a concrete universal? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. What is that singular thing?
That's a fallacy. It doesn't have to be a singular thing.
No, you're not understanding that, because you see, my worldview is undergirded by a singular concrete universal. But what you want to say is there's a couple of particulars. Now.
No, there's a couple of universals.
Okay. No, sir. Here would be the problem. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to try to explain this to you so you understand. This is completely incoherent, all right? Now, Suppose you believe, instead of God as the concrete universal, the source and basis of all facts or propositions or beliefs, you believe that there are a plurality of fundamental parameters. Okay, let's say it's just A, B, C, and D, right?
Yeah,
And
A1, A2, A3, sure.
yeah, A, B, and C, right? Now, here's the problem. Even if you say all the particulars are related to A and to B and to C and to D, then B, C, and D would exist metaphysically independently of A, and vice versa. B would exist eternally with independence of A, C, and D. C would exist with independence from A, B, and D would exist with independence from A, B, and C.
Sure.
So they could not qualify as a concrete universal because they are not all things, with the exception of the entity in question, A, B, C, or D, respectively. All things do not derive from A. All things do not derive from B. So A could not be a concrete universal, nor could B, nor could C, nor could D, because B, C, and D exist with metaphysical independence of A.
Okay. I think where I'm getting lost. Can I just ask you a question?
Do you understand that if you believe that if there is a two or more, a plurality of fundamentals from which you think everything else derives and depends, that would not constitute a concrete universal?
Okay. So this is where we're stuck. Is you believe?
I'm not stuck. You are.
No. Okay. This is where our disagreement is. You believe that a concrete universal must reduce down to a singular thing, correct?
If it doesn't, then it's not a concrete universal.
Okay. So then you're asserting that a concrete universal is required.
No, that's a different issue. The question is either your worldview instantiate, or I should say, is characterized by a concrete universal or not. What you invoked is that you say you have a concrete universal, but what you actually invoked is not, in fact, a concrete universal.
Okay.
It definitionally, it's not a concrete universal. A, B, C, and D. Okay. The unification of A, B, and C takes place in your mind. The unification is abstract.
Not really, because I'm not unifying them. I think
hold on a second. Does the set of all real things in your worldview, with the exclusion of A, does everything that is the set of all real things that is not A, do they derive and depend ultimately upon A?
No, because I don't think there's a singular.
Okay, good. Then you don't have a concrete universal. What you now have is an abstract universal. You have an abstraction of a plurality of particulars.
No, I have a set of concrete universals. All
right, listen. I'm not going to waste my time. Listen, I'm not going to waste my time any further with you. I'll give it one more shot. You don't have a concrete universal. Okay, and here's why, right? What is it that concretely unifies A, B, C, and D? Is the unification concrete or is it abstract? And by abstract, which means you're unifying the particulars using your mind. I'm not saying that you believe that A, B, C, and D are imaginary. Okay, I can accept in your conceptual scheme that A, B, and C, and D concretely exist. All right, I can accept that for the sake of discussion.
Okay.
But is A, B, and C, and D, are they unified concretely by something? Or is the unification abstract, meaning the unification takes place in the mind?
They are unified concretely by the fact that they're all axiomatic.
No.
And when
Okay, stop.
used in conjunction,
With,
they're
listen to me. I don't
responsible
want.
for
I don't want to have
everything.
to. I don't want to have to server meet you. What you are saying is complete gobbledygook. Okay.
No, it isn't.
Listen to me. Don't waste my time further with that gobbledygook crap. Okay, I have no patience for that. Okay, is there something? Okay, that is the unifier. Is there a particular thing? Now, notice very carefully my words. Is there a particular that is concrete that unifies A, B, C, and D, as opposed to your mind is unifying A, B, and C, and D?
There is no concrete particular, but I'm not unifying them in my
Thank
mind
you.
either.
Okay, good. Then there's no unification of them at all, because either the unification is either concrete or abstract. Then there's no unification at all. Okay?
Okay, when you say a universal concrete thing,
A concrete universal would have to be something singular that unifies all the particulars in a concrete way that is not itself.
I just don't understand why you believe there is a singular thing required.
This is definitionally true, Sunshine. I'm not
How is it
defining
definitionally
it.
true?
I'm not. Why? Because if you don't have a particular thing unifying it, okay, there is no thing. Okay, so then if there's no thing, then the unification is abstract, not concrete. There will be no thing. Is there a particular thing that concretely unifies all the particulars that is not itself? What unifies A, B, C, and D concretely? What unifies A and B?
A, B, and C are independent of each other.
Then they're not unified.
And I don't believe you require a unifying singularity.
Okay, good. Then here's the problem. Then you don't have a concrete universal.
I don't believe you require a concrete universal.
Then that's not the issue. See, what you're doing now is bait and switch. Okay. Either your worldview has a concrete universal, or it does not. You told me minutes ago your worldview does possess a concrete universal, but now you're saying it doesn't. So which is it?
I was mistaken because I didn't realize when you said concrete universal, you meant a singular item. I was thinking of a set of several items.
Okay. So is your worldview completely categorized by a concrete universal? Yes or no?
Not a singular thing, no.
Okay. Well, mine is. So we have a completely mutually exclusive worldview. Our worldviews are at its root, at its foundation, mutually exclusive and mutually contradictory.
I don't think they're contradictory. I think that there's a demarcation line between where mine ends and yours begins.
I don't know whether if you're purposely being stupid or you're trolling. I'll leave the audience to decide.
Conversation.
Listen, if you ever talk me again, then I will server meet you. I'm not being harsh here. I have explained this over and over again.
And I understand. I completely understand your position.
And I completely understand that you're over talking me for the umpteenth time. Now, I don't mind over talking, is if I was making mistakes or blunders or I was ignoring it. But you keep on interrupting just because you don't like what you're hearing. You do not know what you're talking about. Okay? My concrete universal is the God of the Bible. You have just admitted you do not possess a concrete universal. every particular within my worldview that is not the concrete universal ontologically derives and depends upon the concrete universal, and its interpretation and its intelligibility is also derived from the concrete universal. So everything is tied and depends upon the concrete universal in my worldview. Your worldview, everything does not ultimately derive from a concrete universal. So even though we might have superficial beliefs that on the surface seem to be the same, they're not the same beliefs, because the superficial beliefs, like a dog wags its tail in the front lawn, okay, will have an entirely different basis as to why it exists. So they would not and could not be the same things. So you and I have completely contradictory worldviews. And we're done here, because from start to finish, you have this low-level argumentativeness when you don't know what you're talking about. First you tell me, oh, my worldview has a concrete universal. And even after I explained to you what a concrete universal is, now you tell me it doesn't, right? I mean, the next time you want to step up to the plate to debate, be a little bit more thoughtful, okay? The floor is open. I deal with plenty of people who they start debating with me, and then they're just contrarian about much of what I say. I know this little shtick. I know this routine. It doesn't fool me. It's a verbal vaudeville act. By the way, anybody in here familiar with Anthony Magnabosco? I guess not.
No.
He's just one of the leaders of the atheistic street epistemology on the internet and YouTube, and he came into Clubhouse and he refused to come up on stage and explain his atheism and his street epistemology. Total chicken shit. Yeah, if you have an open mic and you're not a part of the conversation, I will server mute you. So turn off your microphones, folks.
Hello?
Yeah.
Darth, what are your thoughts on determinism?
I didn't hear.
Sorry, I'm in my car. What are your thoughts on determinism?
Well, it depends on what you mean by determinism. I believe that God, in his plan of creation, his redemptive plan of creation, has decided as to what everything that will come to pass, and what he permits. So, uh, aside from the choices that he gives to agents and the consequences of that, everything is determined by God and his, instituting matter, energy, causality, laws of nature. Okay. So, for example, it may be the case that a particular empty field filled with tall grass will not burn up, all right, because of the cascading cause and effect. But if an agent comes by and carelessly throws, by his choice, a cigarette butt and it goes ablaze, either way, either way, that field catching on fire is, in a sense, determined by God. Now, God didn't determine, he didn't make the person choose that, but he determined that they would have the choice to do that. And because he's fully conscious of himself and therefore conscious of everything that he will permit to come to pass, he can even know what the outcome will be, of our choices, including the response of other human beings choosing, and, for example, physical outcome like the grass field burning up.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, when we say determined, we got to be careful. What do we mean by God determining it? Okay. So, for example, if a meteor crashes in and destroys Paris tomorrow, as far as we know, there wasn't any agency involved there. Okay. But when the bomb went off over Hiroshima, that was an act of agency. But they both came about by the permissive will of God's plan, that what he permits to come to pass. But you see, in the first instance with the meteor, it wasn't so much that God permitted, is that he knew from the onset, from the very first week of creation of how he made things, that this asteroid would come and just destroy Paris, if you will. Unless, of course, in his foreknowledge, he realized that human beings would decide to create a rocket that would divert the meteor. Okay? And he would know that as well, because that would be what he has decided to permit to happen in his plan.
So Calvinists are deterministic in their worldview about God and how God acts from time.
Well, they differ. They differ on their view on determinism. Like, for example, I'm not a Calvinist. However, I do appreciate the very strong emphasis on the sovereignty of God and that everything is within God's plan and control, even things that we find reprehensible. Like, if I got a call this afternoon that one of my children were killed, it would be very, very, very grievous, but I couldn't put the finger of blame on God. But God, in his foreknowledge, knew that would come to pass, and he permitted it. Okay?
Do you think there can be true causality in a deterministic world, or is it, or is what? Go ahead.
I mean, at a certain point, our ability to analyze certain concepts is beyond our limitations. It's beyond our pay grade. So all we can simply say is God has predetermined, he's determined that we will be agents and we have the capacity to freely choose. Okay? And so, for example, Pontius Pilate freely decided to order the execution of Jesus, to crucify him. But God in eternity past, from my perspective, decided that everything that would come to pass would, but certain things he decided they would come to pass even though he preferred that they would not, he still incorporated them in terms of certain evil reactions. Joseph said to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God used it for good."
Right.
Okay.
But so in virtue of that, aren't Calvinists also a little fatalistic? Because regardless of whether Pontius Pilate could have chosen differently, and I hold to the reasoning that he could have chosen differently, he existed in a world where he couldn't have chosen differently. So it's fatalistic in a sense, because if he did choose differently, Christ would have never been sent to the cross.
Well, but here's the problem, okay? I tend to agree with you, but not all Calvinists will have the same view on that. Some could say, well, and if God had foreknown this, then he would have ordained that somebody else that he knew would freely choose to do this in these coalition of circumstances.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, suppose Pilate had a deputy governor, right? And he could have permitted Pilate to die, and then that the deputy governor he'd known would have freely chosen, and then God ordained that to come to pass. But it doesn't mean that God made him choose that. So, but there are different Calvinistic views on that. Okay? For example, my position is God ordains it in the sense that he knows what free actions he's going to permit to occur in any given number of circumstances, and he incorporates that, and it will happen. It won't necessarily happen, but it will happen. Okay?
Right.
So, we're getting to a point of human understanding about the issue of God's sovereignty and providence and human responsibility, where it starts to get to the area where it's above our pay grade as human beings. Now, on the one hand, I do agree with you that certain aspects of Calvinistic theology are fatalistic in that they hold to the view that where there's a divine unilateral predetermination of an individual's eternal destiny. It's divinely unilaterally decided who will believe, and then the consequences of that, which is Augustinian in its root. And Augustine was very influenced by the Manichaean Gnostic cult that held to divine unilateral predetermination of an individual's eternal destiny. So in my view, in eternity past, God does not predetermine ahead of time who will believe. Okay? My view is God predetermines those who do believe what the consequences will be. So the difference between my view and the Calvinist view is corporate election versus individual, unconditional individual election.
Okay.
If you want to read a good book to help you understand the roots of this, send me a DM and I'll send you a link. In my Google Drive, go to the Calvinistic folder. There's two folders. There's pro and con in there. In the con folder, there's another folder called The Foundations of Augustinian Calvinism by Dr. Ken Wilson. This is a condensed version of his doctoral dissertation from Oxford University. Now,
I'll put that on my list. I'm getting through Craig's book still.
Yeah, that book it's an easy read. It's a delightfully easy read to the book. And certain Calvinists like James White lost their minds over this book, right?
Yeah, I don't agree with what James White says, but I think he's a brilliant commentator on
I agree with you. I think I disagree with certain issues on him, and I think certain issues he's extreme. But generally speaking, I agree with much of what he says. Okay, on the Calvinistic issue, I don't agree. Okay,
he held his own.
That doesn't mean that I don't respect him and think that he's a really smart guy.
Yeah.
He didn't do too well with his debate with William Lane Craig.
I thought he held his own. I thought Craig. Well, Craig better, but
I don't think he did so well. He would look. He's good at look. I'm not trying to disparage his debate skills. I think he's a phenomenal debater. And by the way, there are certain things about William Lane Craig that absolutely disgust me, whereas I couldn't say the same about James White. I just respectfully disagree on his Calvinism. So it's not that like I'm a fanboy over one or the other, but personally, I think that William Lane Craig outdid him in that interaction. But that doesn't mean that White didn't put up a good or a rhetorical presentation.
You brought up Craig, so if I could ask you a question about him really quick, I don't want to take up too much time.
Nobody's talking, so you go ahead.
Yeah. So in Craig's book, I'm reading his newest book, and Craig in the book draws a distinction between accepting something and believing something. Do you draw
what book?
In the Quest for Historical Adam?
Oh, weren't you the one you're going to send me that book?
Oh, I didn't send it. I got you. I'll do that.
Yeah, thank
you. So yeah, he draws a distinction between accepting and believing something. And he uses the example of a mathematician. So a mathematician may accept the fact that an infinity exists, but he doesn't believe it platonically, if you know what I mean. It doesn't exist in the platonic sense. That's how he draws a distinction, and he compares that to Christ as the Logos, accepting certain things, but not necessarily believing them. And Craig, being an evolutionist, he relates that to Genesis. What do you think about that?
I think he's whacked out when it comes to evolution. Okay, he cites things in defense of evolution that are pathetic. You can go to the Answers in Genesis site, and you can see they have devastating papers against the line of reasoning. Like he talked about that pseudogenes indicate evolution. Look, he's really good at philosophy. He's really good at theology. But look, he's a compromiser. He just accepts evolution. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just I mean, this is how he's jumping the shark. All right. Look, I still am going to read his books. I'm still going to look from time to time. I go to his website. I read his papers. Look, the guy's really smart, really educated. I have learned and I will learn from him. But I think he's jumped the shark with this Adam and Eve thing, calling Genesis 1 mytho-history. I mean, this is really pathetic. He doesn't even believe that God formed Eve out of biological material from Adam.
Oh yeah, I haven't gotten that far.
Oh yeah, he doesn't believe it. And he believes that Adam was some hominid. Okay? But how'd you like that last guy? Just bickering. You know? Oh, we have the same worldview. No, we do not.
That's why I said he had no worldview. That's why I was saying it. I'm like, how are you going to share it? These people don't make any sense.
Either your worldview is unified concretely or abstractly.
I got to be honest, and I'm sorry for my language, right? But I was listening in, and I don't know what it is, but there's especially atheists, right? They just bullshit and bullshit.
Oh, yes.
Till the cows come home, and it's like it gets boring listening to it.
Yeah, and they continue to do it even after they're called out. They're shameless.
Some of our side does that as well, but we're trying to train them not to. That's true, Darth. Come on.
Well, not to the same extent that the atheists consistently do it.
I agree with you.
I don't know, Darth. I'll have to do a study on your room. I'll put a check mark every time one of the other bullshits.
Yeah, you could write a paper on it.
Hey, Darth, I wanted to thank you for turning me on to the book. What's it called? There Is a God. I'm reading it right now by Anthony Flew.
And Anthony Flew, yep.
I'm about halfway done with it right now. I just got it yesterday.
Oh, good.
All right, did you get it? I just sent it. Did you get it?
Let me look. All I got was text, not a link.
All right, hold on.
You got to send the whole web page. You can't just send the doc file. It doesn't do it.
No, it's not a web. It's not a web page. It's I bought the book. Hold on. I
How many
downloaded it.
how many megabytes is it?
Let me check.
What a moron that guy was. We have the same worldview. No, my worldview is centralized by a concrete universal. Yours is not. So we
You're
don't have the same
asserting that a
worldview.
concrete universal is required.
Listen, you got muted. You got muted because you decided to bullshit, and play the
Darth
old
Dawkins,
contrarian
man.
game. Okay, all right.
You do this
Sorry,
all the
nothing I said
time,
was
dude.
contrary or bullshit, Darth.
Okay, listen carefully.
I always do.
The central thing about my worldview is there's a concrete universal. Does your worldview have a concrete universal?
It does. Well, I think you could say it might.
Okay, I've already explained to you why it doesn't. What? Okay.
Can
what
reality be a concrete universal?
all right. Listen. Ordinarily, I would just server mute your dumb ass. But
you've done it before. So.
Okay, fuck off. Get out of here. Yeah, they never learn. Excuse my French. These people are just human excrement. You're just awful human beings. Okay?
At least he's still calling them human beings.
Yeah. No, the reason why I use such harsh terminology, this is not normal behavior, okay? Normal people don't behave this way. Or I shouldn't say that it's not that people don't lie or that they're sinners. It's just that in our day-to-day lives, it's not normal for people just to simply chronically bullshit about everything within the topic of the conversation. That's not normal.
I agree. In regular life, things are based on reality, and you couldn't get through life without that. And
no.
When we do regular business,
you'd be a pariah to friends, family, workplace. Okay, if you bullshit about everything and people know what it is, no one's going to want to associate with you.
And when we do regular business, it's based on concrete things that have been established before, and everybody does it that way. And so to do religion differently is incoherent.
Yeah, I asked him, does your world have a concrete universal? He goes, oh yeah. Then it turns out minutes later, he doesn't have a concrete universal. He has a plurality of things that he says that are universal, but they're not. Because as I explained, okay, in his worldview, he said he had a plurality of parameters from which everything derives and flows. So we could say that those parameters are A, B, and C, okay? But here's the problem, okay? Everything that is not A doesn't ultimately derive and depend upon A, because B and C would exist with independence from A. So A cannot be a concrete universal.
Nobody gives a shit about you.
Well, the good thing is it isn't about him.
And you know what? That's what happens when your family members, do things to the farm animals. Oh my gosh. I'm surprised he didn't go, Allah Akbar!
So far, you haven't recommended a book that wasn't absolutely right on and wonderful, Darth.
Well, that's very nice. That's very nice of you. Thank you.
I don't know if other people actually read the books you recommend, but I actually do, and it's been wonderful.
Well, thank you. Did I ever send you my Google Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a if you like any of the books, buy them. But it's just a great resource to find books that you may not even know about. Both Christian and secular.
most of the books you recommended I had not heard of before. That's how I got Van Til's Apologetic and the Bahnsen one. I can't remember the name of the Bahnsen one, which was really repetitive, but I did read it. And yeah, there's lots of them that I've never heard of before, and I ended up buying them on Amazon. Because I still like books. It's easier for me to read a hardback book than it is to read something electronic. For me, it's probably because I'm old.
I like both. I like reading hardcover stuff, but I think I have a slight preference for the electronic because it's just boom. I could just click it and boom, it opens up right there. I don't have to sit there and find the book. And
I think it's just my age and how I was brought up and trained and all of that. I have so many books. I mean, they're all over my house.
All my books are now on Kindle. I got rid of all my paperback. But I'd like to find, I do a lot of work in my yard and my garden. I'd like to find an audio format that provides synopsis of books. So I can venture through. But I did Blinkist, and it's terrible because it's just so brief. So I'd like to find something more in depth than Blinkist.
I do have a couple thousand books on Kindle. That's true. But I tend to actually sit down and read physical
Amazon
books
has
a lot more than my Kindle.
Yeah, Amazon has the largest one.
Even the books I wrote, I have Kindle versions of.
Sorry, did it work?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Darth, you know what abrogations are in Islam?
You know, I was just reading about that. I think the other day. Didn't you send me the link on that?
I said, but that site is kind of isn't a good site to go by.
It was dealing with a whole list of abrogations in Islam. I started to read it, but I didn't finish it. I thought you sent that, right? Didn't you? Or it's either you or someone else
sent you.
me.
Yeah, I did send you that, and I've been looking that up recently, and looking at some of the things that were changed, kind of like Muhammad drinking, and then now the law within the text changes in time.
You know what? I know I have. Oh, here it is. I have it on. I have a bazillion. I have so many tabs on my browser. It isn't funny.
We get that in a lot of false religions. You know, Joseph Smith had a bar in his home, and yet Mormons are not allowed to drink.
Yeah, I have it right here. It's wikiislam.net, and it just says the abrogations.
That's a botched site. It's not really a great site to go by because a lot of the stuff, the guy just really hates Islam. The guy that made the website, but it's what led me to understand what an abrogation was in Islam. That site is over embellished. I wouldn't quote anything from that.
It could just be a good springboard, you know. Oh, by the way, here's another one for you. If you want a good site to find quotations of pro-evolutionists that are anti-evolution, go to Talk Origins and their quote mining page. So whenever they come across a quote from an evolutionist who's being honest and it seriously compromises evolution, they say, oh, it's quote mining. But you see, they have such a long list of this stuff that then you could just look down the list of these quotations. After I gave that guy a second chance, he still wanted to bicker.
That's their dogma, Darth. It's just to disagree.
No, I mean it's just asinine. We don't have a shared worldview. I have a concrete universal, and he doesn't share that concrete universal.
A lot of people are here just for entertainment. You know that.
Well, I'm glad to help out. You know, a lot of these people bitch and whine, but what are they doing coming in here and listening? Okay? I'm not raiding other rooms and disrupting stuff. So what are you complaining about?
I know
Now,
that's what I
Kid,
tell people when they complain about rooms where I am. I say there's other rooms on this server. If this isn't doing it for you, try out the other rooms.
Kid,
I like it. I don't
Shieldar,
agree with Darth, but I like it because I learn new things, new metaphysical things every day.
Hey,
And
listen, if I walk into a buffet and up on the stage is Rosie O'Donnell doing a strip routine, I don't have to stay. I can go across the street to McDonald's.
but what if Rosie was doing a strip routine and then Donald Trump was hitting her with like a baseball bat? Would you stay?
Probably not.
You take a look or two maybe and then just leave.
I love it during the debate. You know, when Megyn Kelly said, "You said this about women and that about women," and then Donald Trump raises his finger and with a big smile on his face, he goes, "No, only Rosie O'Donnell." That was fantastic.
I think the only one that's as obnoxious as her was Roseanne Barr, right?
Well, she's earned a little bit more street cred, in that she came out a supporter of Donald Trump. And I used to dislike her more, but I became more sympathetic to her when she was fired and railroaded and accused of saying something racist, which it wasn't. Okay.
Yeah,
that whole Whoopi scandal now brought her to light again. Her and
Whoopi Goldberg is a dumbass. Joy Behar. It just goes to show you could be a complete dumbass. You could be a complete ignoramus politically and in terms of reasoning skills, and still get paid millions of dollars and have your contract renewed every year on ABC.
Yeah, she got a 2-week vacation for saying that when Rosie said her bit and she just got fired straight out of
Imagine
for that.
Imagine that ever lovely and vivacious McCain had said that. If Meghan McCain had said that, would they have treated her that way? No.
I was watching a thing about it last night, and they're saying she can't hate Jews. She took the name Goldberg. It's a Jewish name. And it's like, are you crazy?
I don't agree a lot with Ben Shapiro, but I watch his videos from time to time, and I like his take on Whoopi. He said, I'll support Whoopi if she doesn't subscribe to this whole cancel culture thing. But when she starts to support it and she gets in trouble for it, I'm all for her getting fired.
I saw that video. He looked so different, at least to me. I thought it was somebody doing a parody of Ben Shapiro until I looked it up.
So I was randomly watching a Fulton Sheen video.
Oh, well, that's going back to the 50s.
And I was letting it play in the background, and he used an example of the election of 2024, a woman to be elected president. Right? He used this as an example. And I'm saying to myself, imagine if this comes true. I'll send you the video. He made a joke because he's always making jokes.
Yo, where are the Muslims at?
And I got like I got like a little weirded out. I'm like, what? I was watching the one that he was talking about freedom.
Sheen would always creep me out. He always seemed like a sinister, evil character from like one of those Saturday science fiction movies.
Scary.
Oh, so not just me. Okay, I thought that was just me seeing him as kind of a villain or something.
Different color eyebrows that did it. It was dark eyebrows.
It's not that look. Of course, I think Sheen is a heretic. I think a perpetrator of a false gospel, but he just had that kind of aura of just being, one of these, the evil villain in these low, budget.
I know what you were gonna say, Darth. I know what you were gonna say. I don't
dislike him, but he just has that aura,
No, he does. But some of his rants are pretty good. I don't know. I just listen to some of them sometimes.
Yeah, that's when they only put on, in terms of televangelism, As I said, even though I think he's a heretic, people who were not these money grubbers, you know.
He had angels cleaning his chalkboard. What do you mean? It's amazing.
Well, the nice thing is there's going to be a very nice, warm, and toasty place prepared for Benny Hinn.
You think?
Well, you know what's nice? How about Jan and Paul Crouch? How about Oral Roberts?
I knew Benny Hinn and Jan and Paul Crouch when I was like 12 years old.
Did you know that Jan and Paul Crouch got their start working for Pat Robertson as well as Jim and Tammy?
I'm not sure that's true.
Yeah, look it up. Jim and Tammy were puppeteers working for Pat Robertson's fledgling UHF station. Now, which is funny, Mr. Kit, because you and I are probably the only person who knows what a UHF station is versus a VHF, right?
Sure,
Right?
I went to school for broadcast, but yeah, I grew up with it too. I'm an old one.
Yeah, Pat Robertson bought some really, pathetic UHF channel, and he turned it into the mega televangelism empire of the 700 Club.
But when did he do that? Because TBN goes back to 1972, and I was on TBN in 1973. That's where I met Paul and Jan Crouch and
you met them?
Oh yeah, I worked for them.
No way!
I was on Kids Praise the Lord. That's where I met Benny Hinn and the Crouches.
Oh wow! Oh man, several degrees of separation.
And
boy, Paul Crouch was a nutbag.
It's weird too, because even back then, and remember, I was only 12 years old. Even back then, I was thinking there is seriously something wrong there. What they're doing doesn't really line up with the Bible. And I was only 12 years old at the time. So it's not like I knew much. And Benny Hinn's completely different when he's off the air. So like he would go out and back then, when a typical cafe meal would cost $1.50, he was spending like $300 at the places he would take us to eat, and he would drink a lot and everything like that. I don't know if he does that now. I assume he still spends a lot of money, but I don't know whether he still drinks as much as he did when I knew him.
All right, here we go. Listen, in 1960, Robertson established the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia Beach. He bought a defunct UHF station, and the station went on the air October 1st, 1961.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he went back that far.
Yeah. And let's see here. Let me look up Paul Crouch on it. I'm sure it'll indicate on Wikipedia that he was.
Then I'll tell you my favorite thing about Paul Crouch. You probably
tell
already
me
know
while I'm looking up. Just tell me.
Okay, so my favorite thing is when one of the employees accused him of having a sexual affair with him. Now I watched this.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I watched the trial on TV. His defense was, "I paid you off. You're not allowed to testify about this." So he didn't deny having sex with the guy, and he didn't deny using TBN funds to pay him off. So that money that you ask the pensioners to send you, to get the gospel out and all that, he used to pay the guy off. He didn't deny any of that. He just said, "I paid you off. You're not allowed to testify about this."
Isn't that a right?
Money.
Isn't it a rite of passage for televangelists? I remember the Jimmy Swaggart apology. That was the best.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't. As far as I know, Paul Crouch never apologized for his affairs and paying people off with TBN funds and all that. As far as I know, at least I never saw an apology. And again, I've never seen the guy face to face since probably 1974 or 5. So it's been a long time.
You guys talk about UHF now. I lived for part of the time in the country, and we had when I was growing up, and we had the antenna. But I remember I was really young. My grandfather would have to turn this device that would make these clicks to dial in the station. Did you guys ever have anything like that? It was like a wind up spring device. You turn it and it'd go click, 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 and then once they got the station just finally tuned in correctly with not that much static, it would stop it.
Yeah, you were able to fine tune each channel according to how you had the
it does that sound does not sound familiar. On the older TVs, there were 2 dials. There was the VHF and the UHF. The VHF were the standard channels. UHF had more channels on them, but most of them were just fuzz. And every once in a while, you turn the channels, and then you'd get like poor reception on one channel, and then you turn a couple more clicks, and then one channel might come in clearly, but there were very few, if any.
Yeah, this was an interesting device in that it was separate from the TV, and it somehow wired into the antenna on top.
Oh, it may have been rotating the antenna in different directions.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. Because depending on which direction the antenna is pointing, it would improve the reception.
I grew up in LA, so we had a lot of channels.
Yeah, I live in LA now. Shoot, man, I pay like nothing for gigabit internet. I mean, it's like stark. It's complete difference.
Yeah, growing up was 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13.
I mean, I still remember things like Cal Worthington and his dog Spot and all of that. I know he died recently.
All right, I'm looking at his bio here in Wikipedia, and I'm not seeing any connection to Pat Robertson, but I must be mistaken because I remember reading that he had worked for Pat Robertson.
Well, I don't know whether he did or didn't. I just never heard about it. We didn't do
I might be mistaken about that.
We didn't do background checks on these people or anything like that. My father took me down to where they broadcast Praise the Lord, and they needed kids for their TV shows for kids, their Saturday morning lineup, and so that's how I got in it. But we were also in the audience of Praise the Lord, and so we got to meet, the Christian celebrities of the day and all of that, and we would hold hold hands with the people that were going to do the Praise the Lord program and pray with them before they went out. And so I've held hands with Paul Crouch and Jan Crouch and Benny Hinn and people like that. Because in the beginning, they didn't have much of an audience or anything. So pretty much anybody who showed up to be in the audience got to spend a lot of time with them. And it was the only channel my father had on his TV at the time. It was one of the things he bragged about.
Yeah, I must have been mistaken about that.
But yeah, they were wacky going back to the very early 70s, the Crouches. I mean, I don't think they changed much other than their wackiness. Just they turned the dial up on it. And same with
Looney Tunes.
Same with Hinn. I mean, he was doing the whole bit back then. the healing
Oh,
services and all that.
wait a
I
minute. Wait a minute.
I did go to one of his healing services.
How about this name? How about this name? Now, either you're going to recoil, or you're not. It's not going to mean anything. Morris Cirillo.
Oh, I remember the name a bit. It's not big. I don't know whether I ever met him or anything.
He is a crazed, charismatic televangelist.
And to be fair, there are some charismatics that aren't as insane, but their problem is they don't. They never condemn the ones that are. So like,
Morris Cirillo died.
People like Michael Brown, for instance, I think is a pretty good theologian, and his Jewish apologetics are really good. But he'll never condemn Benny Hinn, for instance. He's been on the Benny Hinn show, and
that's a disgrace.
And he's been called out not for being a bad theologian, but for not calling out the ones that he's friends with that are terrible.
Has Benny Hinn ever been caught in a scandal?
It depends what you mean a scandal.
Yeah.
I remember seeing some with him partying.
There was a raid on his headquarters by the feds, but I don't know if anything came out of it.
And there's been several times where news organizations have tested whether or not people were really healed at his services, and they found the standard things, which was the Benny Hinn organization actually had rented all the crutches and wheelchairs that were there, and put normal people in them that were not hurt at all, so that they could have these miraculous things. And then with Nightline, I think it was, or one of those things, they asked Benny Hinn for a list of people that had actually been healed, and he gave them a list, and they contacted those people, and some of those people said, I've never met Benny Hinn, and other people said, no, he said he healed me, and I still have all the symptoms, and things like that. They couldn't find even one person that's ever been healed at a Benny Hinn healing service. Like I said, I went to one at the LA Shrine Auditorium one time. I've been to one Benny Hinn healing service. And it is like a circus. I mean, it's just like what you see on TV. And just so you know, he doesn't let it. If you really are afflicted, he doesn't let you come up. He decides who comes up, and he does it so that he can show, the miraculous power and all that. He doesn't want a truly handicapped person going up there, because he knows he can't pull off the trick. There's all kinds of people. That's why he has security. There's all kinds of people he will not let up on stage.
Yeah, there was that whole thing with Peter Popov where he would, legit handicapped people would go up and he would like pull their crutches, pull their neck braces off, and these people were really handicapped and injured. And there was a whole thing about how he risked them getting even further injured.
Peter Popov.
Yeah, just that name sounds like it was made up,
You know what's funny?
To be an arch villain or something.
You know what's funny is that you have to be, and I don't want to be mean here, but you have to be a complete moron to be fooled by the likes of Peter Popov. And yet this guy made a fortune because of all the dumb people out there, right? There's just a lot of gullible and dumb people. They've never read the Bible, and they see somebody on television and they think they're a man of God. But, being duped by Peter Popov, you just have to be, a couple of brain cells short of a frontal lobotomy.
There's so many of them. Creflo Dollar, there's so many false teachers out there, and it's a shame because people are looking for biblical truth, and so you got somebody misquoting the Bible, and people don't know that it's being misquoted, and so they send them money.
You know, I remember shortly after I became a Christian, my late teens, I remember one weekend my older brother was visiting, and he started becoming interesting in the Bible. And we were watching Robert Schuller. You remember Robert Schuller?
Absolutely.
So I'm watching Robert Schuller. It didn't take me very long to get his number, that he was a false teacher, right? You know, he's
Right.
just a bit of the West Coast version of Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. And I said, oh, this guy's a false teacher. And my brother says, well, why do you say that? He goes, I'm listening to him. He says, I'm not hearing anything that's contradicting the Bible. I said, that's the problem. He's not overtly contradicting the Bible. He's just not teaching the Bible. What he's saying is contradicting the Bible in a very subtle way, because what he's saying is it doesn't clearly represent what the Bible teaches. It's just syrupy, sappy, feel-good, positive thinking crapola.
Yeah, we went to one of his services too. A lot of things I've only done
The
once.
Crystal Cathedral.
Yeah, that's where we went to. It was at the Crystal Cathedral, and they were talking about how many millions of dollars it took to build and everything. And I thought, it's so small. Why did they bother to spend millions of dollars to build something that only seats so few people? It didn't make sense to me at the time. And
Why?
again,
Why? Because
I
Robert
was
Schuller was an
I was a young
egomaniac.
teen. I was a
He
young
was
teen at the time.
Schuller
so I
was an
didn't choose.
a maniac. It's a monument to his legacy. But the funny thing is, his ministry went bankrupt. Okay, he had to fire his son, who was his heir apparent, and he had to sell the Crystal Cathedral to the Catholic Church, which is funny.
Yeah, I don't think it exists anymore. I'm pretty sure.
No,
I
it's
mean the
Catholic,
Crystal
it's a
Cathedral, not
it's
the
a Catholic,
Catholic Church.
it's a Catholic church.
It'd be better if the Catholic Church didn't exist anymore, but
Well,
I'm
yeah,
talking the
yeah.
Crystal Cathedral.
Robert Schuller, what a heretic! And you know what? Billy Graham endorsed him.
I don't know what to think about Billy Graham because I've gone over a lot of the sermons that are posted, and he gets a lot of things wrong.
Oh, I know. He fooled a lot of people.
And his method of salvation is not found anywhere in the Bible.
I love Billy Graham, man. Come on.
I like Billy Graham. That's the problem, and I got a lot of things out of reading his books.
No, he's very problematic. Anyway,
he's not a Benny Hinn by any stretch of the imagination.
Towards the end of his career, I think he started to get into politics, and I think he regretted it.
Was anybody as successful as Kenneth Copeland?
I don't know, because I don't know what you consider to be success.
As far as just money, as far as wealth.
Oh, I don't know how much these people have. I know, Benny Hinn is swimming in it. I don't know if anybody has more money than Benny Hinn, but Copeland might. I don't know. I never checked.
Copeland wins the creepy factor, that's for sure.
He just puts on a good show. Just is a good show, man.
I'm thinking that who's the one you were talking about, Bart? The one you said you really liked?
Billy Graham.
Billy Graham, yeah. He might be like the Hitchens for the atheists. Might be the same kind of resounding.
What do you mean?
Well, like Billy Graham to the Christians is like Hitchens is to the atheists.
If you just say it in the same words when somebody says, "What do you mean?" then they're not going to get it the second time if they didn't get it the first time.
Oh, he gets it.
No, I get it. We talk all the time. We talk all the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My bad.
But
Were you guys familiar?
Like it's things you don't like about him, but there's still things you like about him, right? So, the way it goes.
I think.
Were you guys familiar with that diet nutritionist queen who had a church in the East Coast somewhere? She just died recently.
You watched that on HBO, or was it? Is it Netflix?
Yeah, I think it's HBO.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that too. I didn't get to see the ending of it though. What happened eventually? I know there
She
was a car
dies.
Well,
in the
she died,
crash.
but I didn't. I saw a separate documentary, and you saw the part where she divorced. She was totally against divorce until she met Tarzan, uh, and then she rewrote her rules on divorce, saying God divorced himself from Israel, so divorce is okay. And then she married Tarzan, and then he tried to get up there on stage and preach, and everybody kind of got the whole deal that he had no knowledge of Christianity. He was just acting. And then later on down the road, he was a pilot at one point, but I guess he somehow fudged the records, and then
He was a
they got a
drug addict. He was a user.
yeah.
He was a user.
But he ended up crashing. So her whole thing was telling people how to lose weight, but in the end, he ended up crashing the airplane with her, and then some of the top people in her ministry, and the reason was the plane was overweight, which is kind of ironic.
Well, her first husband wasn't losing the weight, and he was a very wealthy person. That's how she was able to buy that church and everything.
Yeah, and then some guy, I watched some guy YouTube interview him. He said, because I'm not going to really give you much of an interview, but he said, she got to a certain point where I guess they were at the Larry King interview. He said, I realized I had to get out of this whole thing because she was like, she totally
Well,
fell off the path.
rejected the Trinity too.
Yeah, that's where. Yeah, she was really in with the Christian crowd until then. Once she started doing that, then her book sales went down.
Benny Hinn rejects the Trinity, and most Christians like him. He uses the term Trinity, but he teaches there's 9 people in the Trinity.
How does that work?
He says that each member of the Trinity is a Trinity in themselves.
Oh, sure. That simplifies everything.
It's like a full mesh Trinity.
I didn't realize Darth had left us. I wasn't looking at the screen.
Kit, can I ask you a question about Mormonism?
Sure.
The 20 years now, they say that they say Jesus' life, and he said he went around the world in ministry. What is that? How did that story come about in the Mormons?
I don't know what you're talking about. They don't teach that he went around the world.
They're saying that there's 20 lost years. I heard somebody talking about it today. I want to know if it was true or not. I don't know too much about it.
I used to teach Mormons, and I lived in Utah 18 years. I've never heard any teaching of Jesus going around the world teaching. They believe that he did the things that the Bible says he did, and then they believe that after that he was here in the Americas before the Americas were founded, so that he was here right after he resurrected, that he came here for about 40 days. There's no teaching in Mormonism that I ever encountered that he went all around the world. It's just the two places.
Yeah, that's probably why they meant around the world. But so this happened. Oh, so you're saying it happened after? Oh, okay, all right.
So after he resurrected and did everything that he did in Judea, then he came to the United States and set up a church here, according to the Mormons, in what would later become the Americas. So their whole thing about the Book of Mormon is right before the Babylonian exile, there was a Jewish prophet that God told him about what was going to take place, and so he left Judea and built some boats and came over to what would later become the United States, and founded a colony here, and two groups emerged, Nephites and Lamanites, and all of that. They built a temple and
When
all
do
of
you
that.
think they wrote these things up? Like, when was this considered? I mean, like we call canon, but when was it considered? Like, was it something that
Well, they
from
believe
the past, or
they believe that the Book of Mormon, which is what details all of this, was written between 600 BC and 400 AD. I would say all the evidence is that it was written between 1828 and 1830 when it was published. So it doesn't have any. There's no reason to suspect it was written anciently, except the parts that are just taken directly from the Bible. So it does plagiarize 2,300 verses directly from the 1637 edition, not the 1630. I'm sorry, one of the editions of the King James Version of the Bible. But other than that, there's no evidence that any of it was written anciently.
Mr. Kidd, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So you've read the Book of Mormon, right?
Yeah, many times.
Yeah. I heard from somewhere that it speaks of an appearance of Jesus Christ in the new world. Can you verify that and elaborate on what it said? Not that it's true, of course, but just what it is reporting.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Was they teach that after Jesus ascended into heaven, so they believe the gospel accounts that are in the Bible, and then they believe after he ascended into heaven, he came to the ancient Americas, got apostles, and established his church here in the Americas, did some miracles and things like that, and then ascended into heaven again. That's one of the main things about the Book of Mormon, is that idea that many of the same things he did in Judea, he did here in the pre-American New World. Other than, he wasn't crucified here or anything like that. He didn't go through that again.
Does it speak to who he spoke to or the language that he may have used?
Yeah, they spoke, according to the Book of Mormon, they spoke a Reformed Egyptian. So they claim that Reformed Egyptian is an Egyptian language with some Hebrew in it. No example of this language has ever been found. So
does the Book of Mormon say which tribe they may have spoken to? Because there were lots of tribes in the New World.
Yeah, so the Book of Mormon posits that that the Americans, the American Indians, the Native Americans are I want to be clear about this because there's a couple of different ways to look at it. One way to look at it is the Native Americans are the descendants of the people who left Jerusalem, and they would be the Lamanites, who are the bad guys in the Book of Mormon. And the other way of looking at it, which is more popular today because of the DNA testing and everything, would be that the people of the Book of Mormon were one group among the many that are Native Americans. And they did that because when DNA testing came about, the Native Americans were tested to see whether or not they had Jewish lineage, which would prove the Book of Mormon, and they were done to prove the Book of Mormon, and it turned out they didn't. And so they had to come up with new theories, because up until then the theory was that all the Native Americans were descendants of people that came from Jerusalem.
Now, a quick question. Now, when they said they were allowed to go to settle in Utah, when they were told to go there to live there with those rules, did they have any indentured servitude to the United States at all? Was that anything where, because I know a lot of immigrants would have to do that in the beginning. Is there anything recorded that says they had to do that?
Okay, so they were all United States citizens. The people who settled Utah, the Mormons who settled Utah, were all United States citizens. They didn't have an elongated method of becoming a citizen if you lived in the United States.
So where did they reside before they were told to go to Utah?
Independence, Missouri is one of the places. So Mormons were more centralized at the time. They started in Kirtland, Ohio, and then they would cause a lot of trouble, and so then they would migrate to other places, and their biggest place was Independence, Missouri, which they called Nauvoo, which they said means beautiful in Hebrew, and it doesn't. And then so they left Independence, and I can't remember the place they lived between Independence and Utah. But anyway, Brigham Young, who was the successor of Joseph Smith, got this great vision that they were to go west. He didn't mention Utah at all. Utah was not a state at the time. The word Utah had not been invented yet. But he got this great vision to go west. And the reason I mention the great vision is because 2/3 of the people died along the way. It was actually horrible for them. And when they got into what is now called Emigration Canyon, he looked over the landscape, saw how green it was and all the trees and everything, and he said, "This is the place where I will build my kingdom." And so there's a monument called the "This is the Place" monument, and that's where they decided
What do you mean?
to do it.
How did they die on the way? How did they die on the way? Before you go any further, how did they die on the way?
They died of disease. They died from warfare. They died from lots of things. It was very dangerous to be on a wagon train at the time. But he came up with something that was worse than a wagon train, which was hand carts. And so he had them. Now he traveled in a very luxurious wagon, but he had them bring hand carts instead, which were wheeled things that you pulled with your hands behind you. And so they didn't even have covered wagons when they did it. And he dictated what they could bring and the weight of what they could bring, which I think was 125 pounds or something like that. And so they didn't really have the necessary equipment to survive things like winter storms.
They also didn't have
and all
enough
that. Yeah, and so
Wait, Mr. K, can I just clarify very quickly? They also didn't have enough food because the type of wagons that he's talking about, they didn't go they weren't able to like traverse the terrain, which was quite muddy and stuff like that, right? And as a result, it took far, far longer, and therefore they didn't have enough food, which resulted in a lot of them dying.
And the reason why this matters is because he did this as their leader, and at the time they believed that their leader couldn't order them to do something that was contrary to the will of God, and so they followed him as their prophet, and they thought that this handcart thing, as opposed to covered wagons, was the will of God, and it was going to get them there better and all of that. And it turned out to be much worse than covered wagons and much worse than any other way of traveling to Utah. Now, I don't know if the person who asked the question is still in the room because I'm not looking in the room. But once they got to Utah,
I'm here.
Once they got to Utah, they declared their independence from the United States. So remember, Utah wasn't a state at the time. It was a disputed territory. And they declared their independence from the United States. And several years later, they had a war against the United States. So their purpose in going to Utah, again, Utah didn't exist at the time, was they believed that they were being persecuted by Americans. And so they didn't want to be Americans. They wanted to settle in a place where the American government would have no jurisdiction over them. It didn't work out because, of course, America was expanding, and they wanted the whole land all the way to the West Coast.
Sea to shining sea.
Yeah, and Brigham Young too wanted a lot of land, so he settled areas all the way into what is now Arizona, San Bernardino. There was a settlement there and all that. So he was doing settlements all over the West in this huge swath of land that he called Deseret. And the Book of Mormon says Deseret means beehive. They're way into beehives, Mormons are, because, bees just do their work. They don't think about it. They work together and they don't fight each other. And so the beehive is a real big deal in Utah and in Mormonism as far as a symbol of working together and just doing what you're told to do. So they had settlements. Yeah, they started in Salt Lake City as far as where they settled, but Brigham Young, within a couple of years, was sending people out to settle southern Arizona, southern California, and places like Las Vegas was founded by the Mormons. So he had a really big vision of where the Mormons were going to be and what would be controlled by them. And so when the United States was divvying up land for different states and all of that, they really cut back on the idea of Deseret because, there were other state interests. So Utah is much smaller than the state of Deseret as Brigham Young envisioned it. And by the way, the Utah War wasn't very bloody or anything like that because the United States came in and took control and all of that. But yeah, part of the reason they went to Utah was to get away from the United States. But the United States was expanding, and so you really couldn't get away from the United States on this continent unless you had gone to Canada, I suppose, which they didn't do, although some Mormons did go to Canada. Most of the Mormons that left the United States left because of the polygamy laws. So in Canada, they weren't being enforced, and in Mexico, they weren't being enforced. So you still have Mormon settlements in Mexico that are polygamous, and you still have them in Canada that are polygamous too. I'm probably telling you more than you want to know, but Darth isn't here, so there isn't much going on.
So when this Book of Mormon came out, they don't know who wrote it.
Well, Joseph Smith says that it was written by ancient prophets that lived in the Americas. Again, there's no evidence that it was written anciently. All the evidence leads to him having written it with materials that were available to him at the time. So, like the hypothesis that the American Indians came from Jews from Jerusalem was in other books that were available to him at the time, like View of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith. And there was Solomon Spalding, who had written a manuscript that was very similar to the Book of Mormon. And so there were other things available at the time that he could have gotten it from. And his mother said that he was telling stories about Nephites and Lamanites the whole time he was growing up, which would have been long before he supposedly got the golden plates from which he says he translated the Book of Mormon. So it kind of undermines his whole story, because his story is, I wanted to know which church was right, so I went in the woods to pray. God told me none of the churches were right. And then, a couple of years later, the angel Moroni appears to him, tells him about gold plates that are buried, and about 3 years later, he's able to go and retrieve those golden plates, and by the gift and power of God, he's able to translate them into the Book of Mormon. And sure enough, these gold plates have the story of the Nephites and the Lamanites and the ancient Americas and all that. Well, that's all well and good, except he was telling the story of Nephites and Lamanites around the dinner table from the time he was able to speak. And so it's pretty obvious from the accounts of his own mother.
So you're just saying the Book of Mormon is a reboot?
I'm saying that it's pretty clear that he made up the Nephites and the Lamanites.
It was a joke.
I didn't say it wasn't a joke. I was just reiterating what I was saying, what his mother said,
Yeah,
which was he made them up.
He's just explaining how it went down, because he said he knew a lot about it. I'm just curious and learning about it.
Yeah, I used to teach this to Mormons myself. I was very briefly a Mormon when I was a teenager, and they had me teach other Mormons because they knew I knew it so well. A lot of people don't understand that if you're a member of the Mormon Church in good standing, they'll give you a job in the Mormon Church. I don't mean a paying job. I just mean every member is supposed to do something, whether it's take care of the nursery or teach a class or do a work project or something. Every member in good standing is supposed to have what they call a calling, which is a job given to you. And so every calling I got when I was a Mormon was a teaching calling.
Now, would there be any debates? Would there be any debates between since everybody was so educated on the teachings?
The Mormon Church itself does not engage in debates, and they don't send people out to engage in debates. And the excuse they use is that there's nobody who represents the Mormon Church. And so even when a Mormon, like I had a lawyer when I lived in Utah, his name was Martin Tanner, and he would engage in debates. But at the beginning of the debates, he would always say, "Now I don't represent the Mormon Church or anything like that. They didn't send me here. I don't represent other Mormons." They would always say things like that, where you don't hear Christians doing that too much. A Christian, when he engages in debates, people know that he's representing what he believes to be Christianity, and he's doing his best that he can. But the Mormon Church is really big on, we don't send people out to debates. We don't have representatives that do debates. And of course, they do have representatives. They have their prophet, who's usually an old man, and he has 2 counselors, and then they have the first council of the 12, which is 12 men, and then they have the first council of the 70. These are all the very top leaders of the Mormon Church. If they wanted to engage in debate, they could. I think the reason they don't is because they're trying to appear to be as friendly as possible to the world. And so sometimes debates aren't real warm, friendly, and syrupy and sweet and things like that. And so I think that's the real reason they don't do it is just for PR purposes. Because some of these guys are smart enough to do it. Some of them aren't very smart, but most of them are very smart. What they usually do to choose their leaders is they choose the ones that are the biggest tithe payers, so the richest men. And most of the richest men, have made it in industry and things like that. They're usually very good, very smart people, But they have to learn their theology if they don't already know it when they are called to be leaders. Because obviously not every businessman has spent his life in books learning theology. But traditionally, and they won't say this, they won't say, well, we picked the biggest tithe payers to be our leaders. But if you just look at the numbers, that's clearly what's happening. They're taking the most successful businessmen that they can find in their church, and they're elevating them to positions of leadership. You don't find poor people ever becoming any member of the first 70 or the 12 or never profit,
What are you talking about?
How the Mormon Church chooses its leadership.
Yeah, I heard it's set up a lot like how Islam is.
I don't know anything about how Islam chooses its leadership, so I couldn't help you on that.
Would you consider the Mormon Church a cult?
Yes.
There's a guy. What's his name? Cosmic Skeptic? Is that it? There's another guy. Well, Telltale. Owen. Can't remember his last name. I don't know if you watch that guy. He's also an ex-Mormon, I think. He's had a lot of interesting videos on the Mormon Church and reveals quite a few of the people, but he's more into the Dennis Copeland and that kind of preachers. But yeah, it's interesting to watch. People.
Do you mean Kenneth Copeland?
Well, Kenneth Copeland, yeah, but that's who he engages with. But I think he's an ex-Mormon. He talks about a lot of his backstory sometimes.
Kenneth Copeland.
There's a few of them on there. There's another guy that goes in
Copeland's
does
not a good person.
hidden camera. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre religion.
Yeah, I don't even consider myself an ex-Mormon now. I mean, technically I am an ex-Mormon, but I'm 59 years old and I was a teenager when I was a Mormon. And so it's not much of who I am. And so I don't even think of myself that way. Although, like I said, it's in my far history.
Are you an atheist now?
No.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saved from the Mormonism. Too bad you're not saved and you're not a free man, but...
I'm not saved? Why do you say that?
Well, you're not a free man. You're still under a mythology. You're a slave to some dogma.
Really? What mythology am I under? This should be good. What mythology are you talking about?
In an atheistic worldview, there is nothing wrong with slaves.
I'm not an atheist.
I was talking to the other guy.
Oh, okay.
Who gets to dictate morality in an atheistic worldview?
Do you follow a deity? Do you?
What?
The Kit Kat guy, the Mr. Kit.
Yeah,
He's,
I'm a believer. Absolutely.
yeah, that's what I thought. You're reading books and trading information with Darth and stuff. I